And you've said that the Conservative Party is going down led by a narcissistic Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who people don't trust enough. Russell, as a leader of the local Conservative Party, do you think people like the Conservative Party, or would you agree that it's actually failing?
Well, it's difficult, that, because I think at one level, my experiences of May would say actually we did all right. You know, we defended 5 seats in May locally. We retained 4 of them, which set against the national position is a reasonably good return. We found on the doorstep that certainly from our point of view, yes, people still have strong views about Boris. From some of our supporters still have strong views about Boris. Equally, we find that there is some people who are wanting stability, which there is signs that Rishi is beginning to provide. Obviously, I think what our strategy has to be is distance totally and absolutely the party from Boris. Now Boris is not an MP, and what's really important is for us to stop talking about Boris and start talking about Rishi and the 5-point plan that Rishi wants to be sort of judged on, and let's see how we go against those judgments, because those are the fair and reasonable judgments that let's hope the British people are able to make a true and fair judgment about come the next general election.
What do you think?
Well, you can't really have that. You can't say, let's forget Boris, let's forget Liz Truss, let's start again with Rishi Sunak. The Tory party tries to do that every single time. They introduce a new leader when things have gone terribly wrong and says it's all changed. It won't wash with the British people, forget my opinion. The issue is the British people see the Conservative Party as a badly damaged brand.
Yeah.
And there's massive problems for people like Russell in changing that. They see them as a disunited party because they are disunited. They see them as a party which is out of touch because of the day-to-day concerns that people have, whether it's the cost of living crisis or the state of the NHS. They don't appear to have any solutions. And they appear weak because Rishi Sunak and many of his colleagues didn't turn up at the vote to do with Boris Johnson because they were ducking and diving. They didn't want to commit themselves either way. The British people aren't stupid. So the Conservative Party brand is very badly tarnished. And Russell talks about the local elections in May. The fact is that however good Russell may be, the Conservative Party has got nowhere near controlling Bury for many, many years. This is a place where the Conservative Party should be competitive in terms of running the council. And the seats that Russell refers to, there wasn't a cat in hell's chance of the Labour Party ever winning those seats that Russell talks proudly about having defended in May. So you're down to core Tory territory. The brand is very, very badly damaged. Now, what can be done about that for a political party? Well, all we can do, as Russell has rightly said, is bring some semblance of stability. Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt have to demonstrate that they're able somehow to stabilise the economy. Of course, we've seen recently inflation's gone up yet again, and interest rates have gone up. That means mortgage rates go up. And the people just look at, you see, the people are basically fair-minded. When we had COVID, people said it was very, very tough for the government. Any government would have struggled to deal with COVID. When we had the beginnings of Ukraine, people said, we admire the way that Boris Johnson actually responded to Ukraine. So the British people are objective and fair-minded. But what they've seen in the last 12, 18 months, from Partygate to Truss tanking the economy, to the horrible division within the party, both in terms of the deposing of Boris Johnson as the leader and the right constantly sniping at Rishi Sunak, during this most recent period. There's no way that you can get away with that, because what I think politicians of all colours often do is they don't give the public sufficient respect. They somehow think that they are stupid. They are not stupid. They are very savvy. And at the end of the day, this country is in terrible crisis, as I say, from mortgages to the NHS to people coping on a daily basis. People feel that things have spiralled out of control in a very negative direction. And if you add to the fact the last election was only, 4 years ago, the Conservative Party got a remarkable majority under a very popular leader. They got people voting for them who had never voted Conservative previously in their lives. The vast majority of those people at the next general election have no intention of voting Conservative again. And then you compound with all of that what's happening in Scotland. It's inevitable that the collapse of the SNP to some extent will benefit Labour. That's pretty clear, I think, for all to see. So there is a massive job, a massive mountain to climb for the Tory party to avoid a landslide defeat at the next general election. It's not a question anymore of avoiding defeat. It's whether they're able to avoid a landslide. And that's what I think honest Conservatives will be saying internally, like Russell and others, to their own leadership. If we do not get our act together in some way, bring some level of stability and stop fighting amongst ourselves, then we are heading for a terrible, terrible defeat in the next general election.
I think there's a good wish list there. I'm sure that Ivan, with his historical links to the Labour Party, hopes will be maintained over the next 15 or 16 months. I believe the tanker is turning. I think there is signs of stability.
What other points there? You mentioned about Boris, and you said that you're trying to distance yourself from Boris, which I think everyone would agree is good. So I mentioned why didn't the leaders actually attend the vote and actually vote against Boris to actually say
I think that Rishi Sunak actually made the strongest response to what he thought about Boris Johnson's premiership by resigning from it. So I don't think anybody should doubt Rishi Sunak's views of Boris Johnson. He took the ultimate decision as Chancellor of the Exchequer to say, I don't agree with the direction that this government is going, and he resigned. To focus in on whether or not he voted on Monday night when he had, as I understand, other commitments, I think that's a very sort of, easy option just to pick up on, because we are, very, very clear that Rishi Sunak resigned from the cabinet, and if we're talking about people standing up for what they believed in, it was Keir Starmer who continued to sit in a shadow cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn for 4 years. So those, I think, are the real test of what people judge you by proper actions that count, not a parliamentary vote, which was comfortably won. The right thing was done. Everybody, the people who did vote, there was a Conservative line that was very clear. 7 or 8 cabinet ministers did vote for it, who were able to attend that vote. It was very clear that I think that the direction of the Conservative Party are going in terms of Boris Johnson. I think, as I said earlier in the response to the question, the ultimate thing that will determine the general election is how well the 5 issues that Rishi has asked to be judged on, how well we do against that. And those are very challenging issues. Let's be perfectly clear. We're seeing how stubborn inflation is. So this is not an easy cop-out to be saying these will be easily achieved by the Prime Minister and the government, but those are the ones that ultimately the British people will judge, I'm sure, at the next general election. And I believe, and it might be me trying to be very, very optimistic, that when we ultimately come to the next general election, and some of the things that we do still find on doorstep, is that the position that we find ourselves in opinion polls is more of a reflection of the current turmoil, and rightly identified by the British people in the way that the Conservative government have handled some issues over the past 12 to 15 months. It's not that everybody's suddenly fallen in love with Labour, because that isn't the case.
Oppositions don't win elections, governments lose elections through history. And I just want to come back at Russell. You see, this won't wash with the British people, not me. The truth is they were supporting Boris Johnson and saying how he'd been so unfairly and badly treated until this parliamentary committee report, which said what it said about him misleading Parliament. People like Russell Bernstein were on your programme week after week saying that Boris was being badly treated, he was a victim of a conspiracy, it was all unfair, he'd been a great leader. And let me finish. The other thing is, when Boris Johnson was deposed, the Conservative Party didn't vote for Rishi Sunak as its leader, did they? They voted for Liz Truss as its leader. They rejected Rishi Sunak as leader because they wanted somebody who ideologically was right-wing. That was their preoccupation. Not who was the best person to lead the country, but who was the most right-wing candidate eligible. They vote for Liz Truss. We all know what Liz Truss did. Until Liz Truss tanked the economy, most British people were very fair-minded about why our economy, we had difficulties. They'd looked at COVID, they'd looked at Ukraine, and they said, look, this is really difficult times for any government. But when she did what she did, those own goals during that very short period of time, the British people finally lost any confidence and trust. And when that was followed with the constant division and sniping and all of that, the British people do not feel this Conservative Party is focused on their everyday concerns. They feel they're out of touch and they're disunited. Now, obviously, Russell's job is to put the best possible gloss on the situation for his party. But if he really believes going to the next election, there'll be a collective amnesia amongst the British people about what happened in terms of the latter period of Boris Johnson's leadership, the Liz Truss era, and what's happening in the country now. I mean, people can't get a GP appointment. The Tory party cannot blame that on Ukraine or COVID. People have to ring their surgery at 8 o'clock. If they're not lucky enough to get through by 8:30, they're told to ring again at 1 o'clock. If they ring again at 1 o'clock and they're unfortunately in the lottery, that's now the primary area, they can't get an appointment. If you go down to A&E, your average wait is likely to be well over 20 hours if you are very lucky. These are the things that people are experiencing in their everyday lives. And after you've been in power since 2010, let's be clear, since 2010, 13 years, you can no longer blame anybody else. George Osborne said last week, a Conservative Party conference, he said, we must stop blaming everybody but ourselves, the civil servants and the press. George Osborne, we have been in power since 2010. It's our responsibility. And George Osborne is absolutely right when he says that.
Can I just make two personal points? Ivan, not for the first time, wrongly misquoted what I said about Boris Johnson. My view on Boris Johnson last year, possibly said on this programme, but certainly said on the pages of the Very Times, was time to go. Boris Johnson had outstayed any positive contribution to the Conservative Party. That was my view last year regarding issues relating to Boris. I was not afraid publicly to make that comment. I'm not publicly afraid to make that comment today. I think Boris Johnson did a wonderful job in securing the 2019 general election. There is no doubt at all about that. But issues that once, as Prime Minister, following COVID, Partygate being a good example of issues of the way they got handled through Boris are not acceptable. And that integrity, that trust and confidence that is needed for the British people, which I do fully accept with Ivan, got broken, and will be in a better place as we now move forward with Rishi. Let me also make a comment about GP appointments. And Ivan said it is impossible to get a GP appointment.
It's very hard.
Well,
impossible. Okay, I rephrase it. It is very, very difficult.
Let me say,
it's very, very hard to get a GP appointment.
From personal experience,
very hard to get a GP appointment.
My view is it is very much dependent on the individual surgery that you're talking about. There is a surgery not too far away from here that, let me assure you, through personal experiences, you can contact them in the morning and there is always a doctor available to either talk to you over the phone or to go in and see. Some well-run surgeries in Bury actually do see people and are in a far better places than some others.
Right, so I'm happy to respond to that. It's fine. If Russell wants to say that on this programme, that's absolutely fine. But the majority of people listening, in terms of their everyday experiences, will know what I'm saying is accurate. I take back the word impossible. Right? It is nearly impossible to get a GP appointment when you need it and want it for yourself or a vulnerable member of your family. And that's just, it doesn't matter whether Russell wants to put a spin on it in terms of his own. The vast majority of people listening to your programme will connect and relate to what I've said. It's based on my experiences and many of my friends, family members and former constituents' experiences. It's not based on a party political point. And the final point I would make is this. Until the parliamentary report says that Boris Johnson had misled Parliament with a Conservative majority on it, the majority of Conservative members still favoured the return of Boris Johnson as the leader of the Conservative Party. This is 4 weeks ago, Ellie. So Russell can say what he wants. That is the state of their party. Until 4 weeks ago, their members still favoured, as you know, the return of Boris Johnson as their leader. This is how out of touch they are in terms of the way the public feels about the government's performance in the last 18 months.
I think again there's a slight exaggeration by Ivan in that
about the Tory members.
About the Tory membership. There is no doubt that there is members of the Conservative Party who are still supportive of Boris. There is of that I would not dispute for a moment. But it is nowhere near the majority.
Prior to the parliamentary report, I said, Russell.
Well,
4 weeks ago,
even before,
there was a majority who wanted him back.
No, not a majority. I fully appreciate there was a sizable number, but it was nowhere near a majority.
Okay.
But I think there is a real valid point that's being made that there is and was significant numbers of the Conservative Party membership who saw Boris as somebody who they believed should have been allowed to carry on, and they were wrong and out of touch.